Hey, how's it going? Today, I'm talking about 7 things that runners who DNF did.
This is Running to the Castle, a podcast for injury-prone Run Disney runners on a journey to running magical miles. Join me, Dr. Allie, as I share the secrets I've gathered as a runner, doctor of physical therapy, and coach. You'll learn the exact ways I get my clients to the castle strong without feeling broken or held together with KT tape as they cross the finish line.
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, I posted on Instagram. Now, I have seen this information or been coming up with organizing my thoughts, let's say, around what are some common things that runners who do not finish their race, are there common things that they do that potentially lead to them not finishing that race? I think this is important to talk about because if you know some common themes, you can avoid it yourself to make sure that you do cross the finish line. Now, of course, there are always race day things that come up. I'm not talking about those today. Like there are always things like you get sick or something happens at the race the day before if you're doing the challenge, dopey challenge or the 2-course challenge, things like that. Something could have happened and you weren't able to finish because of that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a variety of things that are in our control most of the time. So there are 7 patterns that I noticed that people who did not finish their race, they were doing. So let's talk about them today. And hopefully you aren't doing these things so that you do finish your race. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Dr. Allie. I am a physical therapist helping Run Disney runners who are injury prone or currently injured. I help them cross the finish line. That's the guarantee I give my clients who work one-on-one with me. And so far, we are 100% there. Everybody who has worked with me has crossed the finish line at their race, some even way faster than they had even anticipated. They thought they couldn't even start the race, and then they finished faster. So here we go. So the information I see with the DNFs, this is actually information I have noticed from clients from what happened in the past to them before we started working together, or runners in the DMs with me, other Facebook and social media posts. So let's get into them. So the first one, they started strength training when they trained for their race. So this one may be confusing because you're going to say, well, you need to strength train in order to get past the 8 miles, the 9 miles, and 10 miles, to be able to do the half marathon, the 2-course challenge, the marathon, dopey. Yes, and you need to start strength training sooner. When you start strength training at the same time that you start training for your race, it's late. What I noticed is that when a runner starts strength training when they're training for their race, they end up overloading their body, and the thing that they're trying to prevent, they actually cause. So many of these runners are trying to prevent injuries, and they end up causing an injury because they've overloaded their body too much. They're trying to add on more miles. They're trying to add on more strength training. They're trying to add on more resistance, add on more weight, and it's too much for the body. The body can only take so much, and it can only take so much new stuff. So if you've been listening the past couple of weeks, I've really been talking about strength training during the build phase. If you're new here, build phase is one of the phases of a successful running journey. There's the build phase, the training phase, the taper phase, race phase, and rest and recovery phase. So there are 5 main phases of a running journey. The build phase is the 3 to 4 months before official training starts for the race. So as an example, I am training for Chills and Thrills, or I am registered for Chills and Thrills Halloween, Disneyland Halloween half marathon weekend. Official training for that of my training plans is May 4th. I am in the build phase of training for that because I am in the 3 to 4 months before official training starts. So if we backtrack and go May 4th, go back 1 month is April 4th, go back 1 month is March 4th, go back 1 month is February 4th. That's really the latest I recommend starting strength training. I started in January. I started about 2 weeks before this podcast episode will air. So doing that 3 to 4 months, that's the build phase. This is the time frame to focus on strength training because your body, it can take a lot, but it can also only take so much. So adding in new strength exercises, especially as runDisney runners, the majority of runDisney runners are not elite runners. We are not getting Boston qualifiers. Some of us aren't even getting proof of time for the half or full marathons because you don't need a proof of time unless you are going to get under 5 hours for that marathon, under 2.5 hours for the half marathon. So some of us aren't getting that. Many times that's because we're new runners, and I'm classifying myself in this. I'm not necessarily a new runner, but I don't anticipate finishing a half marathon in under 2 hours and 30 minutes. Maybe I can, but I mean, I did that in 2017. I did 2 hours and 24 minutes, I think. But that was 8 years ago, and I don't want it that bad. Like I want to have a good time. I'm not here for a fast time. I'm here for a good time and a long time. But some runners aren't going to get that proof of time because they're new. Many runDisney runners started within the past 5 years. So when you're new or when you're injury prone, your body can only take so much. So focus on that strength training in the 3 months before official training starts and continue. But now it's not new. Now you know how to strength train. You know what exercises you're doing, and you don't necessarily need to add more resistance. You've built that up, and now it might and usually is just maintaining that strength and that weight and resistance. And then you get to focus on the mileage. So avoid strength training for the first time when you officially start training. Focus on it beforehand. The second one, they ran the same pace no matter what training run they were in. I cannot stress this enough. You need to be adding in a variety of paces to not overload your body. So you may notice a theme here. The biggest thing is overload. So you will hear runners say your long run needs to be zone 2, or you need to run easy pace miles. They're saying the same thing slightly differently. I don't follow heart rate zone running personally. If I have a client who wants to follow that, that is fine. I will not dissuade them from doing it. We can work with it. But I don't find out my clients' heart rate zones. And the reason for that is, we do pace testing throughout training together. So either historical data or actual testing it. And now I'm leaning more heavily on actually testing it. And the reason I don't do heart rate zones is because there are so many things that go into what makes your heart rate higher. So one thing could be if you're coming down with illness, your heart rate's going to be higher. So you could be running easy miles, easy pace, and your heart rate is in zone 3 or 4. Your heart rate could be a little higher if you're currently battling an injury, which 90% of my clients are. Your heart rate can be higher. And other factors, are you running indoors versus outdoors? Are you in a new area? Do you have to go uphill? Is there a dog barking at you from somewhere? Is there a man walking near you? All of these things can add an element that would increase our heart rate. You could be scared of the dog or the man. I wish that weren't the case, but it's a fact. I get that way, and I know my heart rate will go up when these things are happening. So I could still be running easy miles, but my heart rate does not reflect that. So I like to go based on pace. So we look at historical data, and we look at actual testing of what's your easy, your moderate, and your hard paces, and then follow those numbers. A couple of days ago, I went for a long run outside. I had to literally keep looking at my watch to make sure I was in the correct pace. I was running the correct pace. That's fine, because you'd be checking your heart rate anyway. You'd be checking your watch. So you need to have a variety of different paces that you're running to add variety to your run so that you can get better. If you run the same pace every time, you don't necessarily get faster. And if you run the same pace every time, you run your body into the ground, because usually when we go the same pace, we are going too fast and overloading our body. I see so many runners in these Facebook groups that are really happy about a new distance and a new PR. I do not want to see two news in one statement. That's too many variables. If you have ever gone through 8th grade science, you change one variable at a time, because changing two at a time, if something goes sour, which it usually does when you do that much overload on your body, you don't know which one it was. Was it the new distance or was it the pace? So let's change only one thing at a time. And it's really hard to go for a long time at a really fast pace. It's like staying up late or pulling an all-nighter multiple days in a row. You can only do it so many days in a row before you crash. Same thing with how fast you run. You can only hold that pace for so long before you plateau or get worse or get injured. I recommend 2 shorter workouts, runs in the week. Make those faster. Make them the 30-20-10 with your easy, moderate, and hard pace all wrapped into one, or do progression where you're going a little bit faster, every 30 seconds, every minute or so, or do a tempo run. Make those your speed workouts. They're short. They're like 2 miles long total, including warm up and cool down. They're like 2.5 miles long, including all of that. So it's like 15 minutes of hard work. Push yourself during those 15 minutes instead of 3 hours on a long run. And then make the long run easy peasy pace. Do a reverse PR. How slow can I go without actually walking on this? That's the PR I want to hear about. And I call it a reverse PR. It's a little tongue in cheek, but it's true. How slow can you go on that long run? That's the PR I want to hear about. Okay, the next one is they added 2 miles to their long run every week. And this is no fault of their own, because this is what the other training plans have you do. it has it written in there that you're doing 1.5 miles to 2 miles added on every week or every other week. And it bothers me even more with the every other week one because it gives you a false sense of slow increase. It makes it seem like, oh, well, I'm doing 6 miles this week, but it's 3 miles next week. So obviously I can do 7.5 miles or 8 miles the following week because I had 3 miles in between. The problem is the increase should be gradual from the previous long run. So yes, you can have a deload week. I have deload weeks every 5 to 6 weeks in my training plans, but the increase is based on the last longest run. So that increase for an injury-prone runner, that should be 10%. And you will find many other run coaches say 10% is unnecessary. My professional opinion is 10% is perfect. It's an increase, but it's such a small amount of increase that you don't even notice it. And it's no problem. I've had runners say to me with my increases go up by decimal places. So if your first run is 3.1 miles, the next one is 3.4 miles. It goes up by decimal places. And one runner in particular that I'm thinking of said there's no dread each week for the long run because it's such a stupid, easy amount to increase. It's like, oh, I could totally do that. And that's what I want you to feel. Oh, I could totally do that. I want you to feel like you could do more and have the discipline to not. Have the discipline to follow that minute increase because then you're getting further, you're improving, you're progressing, but you didn't overload your body. Notice this theme again. You didn't overload your body. 2 miles every week or every other week with that false sense of slow increase, it's overloading your body. 2 miles, if we're talking about the 10% rule, 2 miles added each week should only happen if you're already running 20 miles on your long run. Let that sink in for a minute. If you're adding 2 miles to your long run and you want to follow an actual slow and steady increase, you should already be running 20 miles as your longest run. And that's the peak long run in my training plan. Somebody who's doing a marathon, 20 miles is their longest. Okay? Let that sink in. And it's so that you don't overload your body. So runners who did not finish their race, looking back, they were adding about 2 miles to their long run every week. It was too much, too fast. They overloaded their body. They overtrained. The next one, they focused a lot on the shoes that they wore. Shoes are necessary, but they're an accessory. It's what you do with those shoes that's the important thing. I use the example of being able to bake bread. So if you don't know, my husband has many food allergies. One of them is gluten. He does have celiac disease. So it's technically not an allergy, but we have to be very careful. And one thing with the gluten-free products is they use a variety of different types of flours and starches in order to make the flour blend taste good. Gluten-free food used to taste disgusting. It still kind of does some of the time, but they have gotten so much better even just in the last 10 years. And so one of the things that a lot of these flour blends use is potato starch in their blends. My husband cannot tolerate potato starch. He cannot have it. So I bake bread every couple of weeks. I hate baking and I hate cooking. I love my husband dearly, so I make this bread. And I use the example of your KitchenAid stand mixer is like your shoes. I can have the fancy $300 KitchenAid stand mixer, but if I don't know what to put in the stand mixer, I won't have bread, or I won't have bread that has risen. I need those 2 steps of adding active yeast and letting it sit for half an hour before I bake it in order for that bread to rise. My stand mixer is the accessory. It is not making good bread. Your shoes are an accessory. Yes, can they make somebody a little bit faster? Yes. But what that person does in the shoes, around the shoes, in addition to the shoes, is what propels them. If you buy carbon-plated shoes and aren't strong and aren't kind of fast, the couple of seconds that you get on your pace that improve your pace, those couple of seconds per mile, it's not going to matter. If you're doing a 6-hour marathon, a couple of seconds in the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter. Somebody who's trying to break the 2-hour marathon and get from 2:01 to 1:59:59, those seconds matter. But that person who's getting who's running that pace, they're doing the strength exercises. They're doing the speed work. They're doing the recovery techniques so that they recover faster, so that they can go out and run or strength train regularly throughout the week. So focusing and changing shoes too often, what it does is it pulls the focus from the things that matter. It would be like me focusing on making sure that I have my KitchenAid mixer as opposed to making sure I have my active dry yeast. When I could use a bowl and a whisk, or a bowl and a spoon, and still get the job done because I have all of the ingredients that I need. So focusing on those shoes too much pulls the attention away from focusing on the strength and the speed work. Of course, yes, we do need shoes. I don't recommend running barefoot, but changing and getting 3 new pairs of shoes in a 6-month time frame, which is about the average that my clients do before we start working together. They average about 3 new pairs of shoes because each one doesn't work. What's the common denominator here? What else do we need to change? And then let's look at the shoes. Okay, next one. They rated their success based on how they felt. It's always going to feel hard. Please, please, please do not base your success on how you are doing with training with it doesn't feel easy yet, so it must not be working. It is always going to feel hard. New level, new devil, right? It's like comparing a high schooler or somebody just going through school, elementary, junior high, high school, and basing whether they're getting smarter based on if each next test is easy or not. Each next test is always going to be hard for the student because they're learning, but that stuff in the moment is hard. Each of your workouts is going to be hard to a point. Now you can follow the 30-30-30 rule. 30% should be really hard, crummy. 30% should be easy and like, holy cow, I could do way more than that. And 30% is kind of neutral, like, oh, I could go either way with this. But don't base your success on whether it felt easy or hard. Use numbers. What was your old race pace? What was your old easy pace? What was the old amount of weight you could squat? Or what was the old number of heel raises you could do? Because as you get faster, as an example, as you get faster, each speed workout is going to be hard because you're now faster. So you're doing faster. So if your hard speed work run is 5.7 miles per hour on the treadmill right now. Well, six months from now, maybe that pace is 6.2 miles per hour. 6.2 miles per hour is going to feel hard. And each of your workouts that you do that use that pace feel hard because you've gotten better. But it's still hard because you're still challenging yourself. But if you go back and do 5.5 miles per hour or the 5.7 that used to be your fast, it's going to be easier. The next one, they avoided cross training. It is a common thing, and I'm grumbling a little bit. I feel like Levi right now. I'm grumbling a little bit because it does annoy me when other coaches say that cross training won't do anything for you. So if you are injury prone, please, please, please use cross training. Use cross training because it does make you a better runner. It makes it so that you can continue to work your heart and your lungs to build your endurance and your stamina without overloading your muscles, your joints, and any injuries that are creeping up. So cross training should be something like walking, riding a bike, using the elliptical, using a rowing machine, swimming, and you want to mimic what your heart and your lungs, what your heart rate and your breathing rate are like when you're running. Mimic that using these cross-training techniques. That will build up your stamina and your endurance without all the extra pressure on your joints. You'll see in the Facebook groups where people are like, oh, well, I barely trained for the Disney World Marathon. But if you actually dive in and see what they were doing, oh, well, they also play singles tennis and they also swim however much they swim. Oh, and they also go on mountain bike rides. Well, so they seemingly didn't train for the marathon, but they did. They just didn't use 100% running. They cross-trained as well. And runners who did not finish because they had an injury, they stuck with solely with running almost 100% of the time. And that's because they ended up overloading their muscle or their joint or their ligament, got an injury, and had to take time off from running, but they weren't doing the cross training. So they didn't keep up their endurance. They didn't keep up their stamina. Maybe their injury healed. Maybe it didn't. But even if it healed, they still didn't have enough endurance and stamina to last them for that complete half marathon or full marathon or dopey challenge, and they did not finish. And then finally, they stretched before they ran. This one I get some flack for. I am a physical therapist, and I do not recommend stretching before you run. When you stretch when you're cold, it's like putting a rubber band in a freezer, pulling it out after 2 days of it in the freezer, and trying to stretch the rubber band. It really doesn't go anywhere because it's cold. Stretching before you run may not cause an injury, but it's really not doing much. Runners who did not finish were more likely to be stretching before they ran than stretching after. And what happens, I've noticed, is that, again, kind of like the shoes, it pulls the focus away from the important things, the things that actually work. They stretch before they run, so then they don't stretch afterward because they stretched before. When in fact, stretching afterward reduces soreness, improves recovery time, and makes it so that you aren't hobbling around the next day or days after your workout. But the runners that stretched before they ran, they didn't then focus on the stretching and the recovery afterward because they already did it beforehand. So it took away from the things that actually work. And they also, since they stretched beforehand, they felt like they were warmed up. So they didn't walk for half a mile or a mile to actually warm up their muscles and their joints. So that's all I have for you today. So the 7 things that I noticed, the 7 patterns I noticed: strength training when you start your official race training, running the same pace every run, adding 2 miles to the long run every week, focusing a lot on the shoes that they wore, rating their success based on how they felt, avoiding cross training, and stretching before they ran. I hope you can avoid these types of mistakes so that you can train properly and you can cross that finish line and avoid getting injured.
For the runners that want to finish their next Run Disney race stronger and faster so you stop getting injured, you beat the balloon ladies, and you cross the finish line, I invite you to check out my newest program, Stronger, Faster, Finisher. Get the workouts you need to build speed, stamina, and strength. If that sounds like something you're looking for your next race, visit the link in the show notes to learn more. As always, thanks so much for listening. That's all for now. Talk to you soon.